Welcome and thank you for joining us for the inauguration event of Analogues Devices UK office. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jackie Rutter. I'm European Marketing Director for Analogue Devices, and today we've got an awfully busy day for you guys. We're going to start the session, actually we're going to divide the day into two sections. We're going to have the official presentations by members of the European leadership team, headed by Mike Britsfield, our Vice President of Sales for Europe. Shalini Palmer, oh Mike, there we go, Mike. Got Shalini Palmer, European Sales Director for Mobility across EMEA, newly accepted position. And Alistair Boyd, Sales Director for Northern Europe, EMEA. So, the agenda then. So I'm going to start. So most of you know I did engineering, right? I'm an engineer before marketing. I didn't really like history. However, I'm going to attempt to provide you a background history session on why ADI is investing in this building and in this region. And then the links with the graduate scheme that we have at the University of Brunel. We've got members from the university with us who will be later on presenting about how they're supporting Analogue Devices in terms of attracting a range of local talent. Will then be followed by Mike Britsfield, who's going to be discussing, the importance of the UK for Analogue Devices and why the company is heavily investing in the UK. Alistair Boyd, Director of Sales Northern Europe, and like me, coming from Linear Technology, I think he's very well placed to discuss with you the next steps of the acquisition of Analogue Devices and Linear Technology and where we are today. And then Shalini Palmer. So I mentioned earlier, Shalini's accepted the new role of Sales Director for Mobility across EMEA. She's been with the company for over 10 years and quite significant leadership roles. Previously running the industrial healthcare and consumer cluster for EMEA, and previously to that running Northern Europe. She's going to be discussing with you, the excitement of the new role, what that means for the UK and the vision of London from 2030 and beyond. And then finally, we've got Emma Gilbert from the University of Brunel, who's going to be discussing with you very briefly how the local universities, very prominent universities like University of Brunel, is supporting companies like Analogue Devices. Right, shall we start? History lesson? Over 100 years of history in the making. And this is it, the record store. The record store, how it started is the EMI. So EMI, very prominent in terms of mass production and manufacturing of companies and labels and records like the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, etc. We've got 85,000 square feet, and ADI is one of the first ones of technology companies to invest in the area. But let's start really 100 years back, the top dog. So you probably, hopefully, if you weren't too lost finding the car park, you would have seen the dog, the Jack Russell, the HMV, his master's voice, right in front of the building. But it actually started 100 years ago by a lady. Oh yes, a lady. Who's this Australian soprano called, and I'm not very good at history, but it's Nadine Melba. She was a dame, and she actually started the foundations of the gramophone company over 100 years in Hayes, in this building. Now we go over 30 years and there's a huge success, right, with the gramophone company, and she gets the contracts over architects, very famous architects called Wallace Gilbert and Partners. You probably have heard of them because they designed the Hoover Building in the States and also the Victoria train station in central London. So they were commissioned to produce not just the record store but also the vinyl factory. And then a star is born, the star, EMI. EMI, similar story here with Analog Devices and Linear Technology. It was born by the merger of two very successful companies. In one side you had the Gramophone company, the other one, their most competitor, the Columbia. They merged together like Analog and Linear did, and they produced a star, EMI. Now, EMI, for someone like me and quite a few of us in here with an engineering background in a desire and an interest in technology, EMI is very interesting because they had their own technology innovation department, the Central Research Labs. And it's fascinating, at least for me, and I hope for the history lesson it does for you guys. They did innovations such as the such as, for example, the stereo sound. First recording of stereo sound was done in the train station just behind us, of the trains going in and out of the train station. And another fascinating fact is that they pioneered the first airborne radar, who saved thousands and thousands of lives at World War II. That all happened in this building. I mean, it's impressive. And at the peak, they had 22,000 people working in these buildings. So it was very, very successful, especially for Hayes. But let's forward, and the British invasion. I'm not talking just about Boris Johnson here. What I am talking about really is, I don't know, there's a band, I'm being told, from Liverpool. I'm not sure. Who could it be? But the Beatles, right? And I'm told, I've been corrected by my husband and other people in the room, that it started in 1962, right? Not 1964. It was 1962 was the Beatles who recorded, or they got the label, right, from EMI. They got the deal. And then it was in 1963 that they had the big success worldwide with the Love Me Do, I believe. I'm too young for it, so Love Me Do. And it was in 1964 that, following the Ed Sullivan show, that it was the British invasion. We had Queen, Pink Floyd, Deep Purple, I think, one of those, yeah, all of those, right? So, the success, British invasion. But unfortunately, not all that's good lasts sometimes. So what happened was, in Hayes, that the vinyl sales started to go down. Why? We've got some new kids on the block. We've got the cassette player. We've got the CD. So unfortunately, pardon?
Napster.
And that's, yeah.
Streaming killer.
Yeah. No more downloading, it's streaming, I'm told now, right, for my children. So yeah, things evolved. So what happened? EMI merged with Thorn, and they took the very difficult decision to stop the vinyl productions, vinyl operations in Hayes, with quite devastating impact to the community. However, when there's a down, there's an up. And the vinyl renaissance. And about 8 years ago, there's huge projects, huge investment into the region, both from the council side, the government side, and from private companies like INU, who actually, about 8 years ago, bought these buildings, commissioned some really good architectures again, award-winning architectures, and redesigned these buildings, keeping that heritage of technology innovation to attract companies like Analog Devices. Probably most of you know that Analog Devices have over 50 years of working in many of our markets, specifically in the audio market. And we've got one of our key customers, Bauer and Wilkins here, who have sponsored a number of our stereos in the building. And we'll be doing a little bit of some fun later on with them in terms of raffling some of their wireless headphones. Sorry, gone there, went into Spanish there for a minute. And they've just recently launched a range of their products with Analog Devices, so I'm sure they'll be quite keen to talk to you about that afterwards. And where we are today, 14th of June 2019, the opening of the UK office. And hopefully, this is a new chapter of the building. This is the start where Analog Devices hopefully can add to many more of those first technological advances. Now, I'm not just going to give you a history lesson, I'm also going to give you a geographical lesson, but very briefly, because I wasn't very good at geography either. Now, one of the reasons why we chose this location, but I'm told to actually get here or find our car park was quite tricky, but that was done with good reason. We wanted to test to see if you could get here, actually. And now we're going to debug all of those errors that came up this morning. So we have got that list, and we will be debugging. But the real reason, is, yes, direct line to Paddington, ideally in 20 minutes. And I understand that most of you did come by train this morning, and that actually works. So that's good. I did test yesterday to the M40, junction with the M40, M25 is under 15 minutes, even in torrential rain. I tested that yesterday. And we're about a mile and a half, which is 5-minute drive, to junction 3 of the M4. So there's a reason, there's that connectivity to customers, to partners like Arrow and Anglia, who we have here, and to our staff, really. And then links to the local community, to that pool of talent. I don't know if you're aware, but ADI has a graduate program, a 2-year intensive graduate program. We're very proud of that. And I don't know if Kieran's in the room. Kieran, stand up. So Kieran went through our 2-year. Yeah, come on the front. Come on. Yes, yeah, come on. Yes. Yeah. So Kieran went. Yeah. There you go. We don't Photoshop. That is Kieran. Yeah. So Kieran went through our graduate program, and this year, the Electra Awards, right? The Electra Awards are European awards. Kieran was awarded by the European readers, so not just in the UK, a Rising Star New Engineer of the Year award. So I think that's an applause, right? So ADI invests in the area, invests in our staff, we invest in the graduate programs, but we need support. We need support from universities that can provide us with that pool of talent, and that we can prepare with our graduate schemes to amazing engineers like Kieran. And then Brunel University, only 2 miles down the road. They have over 12,000 students, many of them in the engineering field, and we'll be tapping into those and feeding into the graduate scheme to continue growing in the UK. And I've got a really good biased gender photo there. See, ladies engineers. There's a few of us still in the room. And Brunel are very, very keen to carry on pushing ladies and men into the engineering field.
So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for attending this inauguration ceremony and inauguration event. So I think the first thing for me to cover in this, because I'm talking about why the UK. So putting in context for ADI in EMEA. EMEA is about a quarter or perhaps slightly less of ADI's total business. It obviously depends a little bit on our consumer business in the US and some of the other end market segments, but just say it's around a quarter for an easy number. The UK is about, or perhaps a bit less, but say it's around 10% of that business. So overall, you say that's the context we're looking at. So why have we decided to not only move to a new office, because as part of the integration between ADI and Linear Technology, we decided obviously we want everybody in the same office. That's a pretty kind of a minimal requirement for integration. But why do we decide, rather than just picking somewhere a little bit further out, we could have picked anywhere for a new office together. Did we decide to invest, which was actually quite a large amount of money, in a brand new office in a different area of London that we think can really attract rising talent? And I think you'd summarize it in the word innovation. And any of you who've listened to the speeches and the announcements from Vincent Roche, our CEO, knows that ADI really believes that innovation is what drives growth. I've talked a bit to other people here before about how the semiconductor industry is moving almost into two groups. Into the group of companies who believe in innovation and believe that's what's going to drive our stock price and drive our growth and our revenues going forward. And the group of companies who believe more that the growth in their stock price is going to be related to their financial acumen and financial transactions and typically invest a lot less in R&D. So Analog Devices are focused on innovation. We've taken that bet. We believe in innovation. So how is that related to the UK? I think if we look at it and we look, there's a lot of, I suppose, gloom to some degree in what's happening at the moment in terms of the uncertainty of Brexit, the uncertainty of other events in the world. But longer term, you've got to look at the core and the basis for technology within the UK. If you look at the big companies, and examples I might give would be Airbus in the satellite and aerospace and defence area, Jaguar Land Rover in the automotive business. I mean, there's a temporary issue at the moment, I know, in terms of sales in China, but I believe it's temporary. It's class is permanent, I think, and form is temporary. And I think I would see JLR as a company who truly see themselves as being up there with the high-tech car companies and are investing to make sure that gives them their sales growth going forward. And of course, you have companies like Dyson who are taking some of the consumer areas to newer, with a lot more innovation, whether that's in the motor technology which drove their initial business or whether it's now in electronics to work with that. So there still are those large UK indigenous companies that drive innovation. Then you go to the next level down, and there's a lot of customers that we would see, and examples will be companies like Renishaw, for example, the UK locations of Honeywell or GE, companies who are medium-sized, but we see as having potential for significant growth for ADI and also driving the innovation. And then below that, and this is what we're talking about perhaps on the next slide, is that whole ecosystem of smaller companies and startups. And the UK, I think, has succeeded in reinventing itself as being a center of those new ecosystems. And for us, that enables us not only to plan for future growth driven by UK-based companies, but it enables us to engage with that ecosystem and learn a lot more to help us work with and understand better the growing market trends. So there's a lot of impact of innovation. It's not just innovation that says we can work with small companies to get huge revenues. We know that won't happen. We can work with small companies, understand the ecosystem, and that helps drive the innovation in the company elsewhere. And to do that, we have to pick the right locations to engage with those startups and ecosystem, and the UK is a pretty strong location to do that. 2.5 billion worth of new investment in 2018. A surge in funding for areas, I mean, fintech may or may not be important to ADI, depends exactly on what fintech means. But certainly, AI, particularly as it's related to kind of the machine learning and the knowledge environment, drives the requirement for really good sensors as well as really good algorithms and software. So that has a positive impact on ADI. So there's a huge amount of new companies and investment, 17 tech IPOs ahead of Sweden and France. And by the way, we also see and are thinking about what to do next in France, because our French office may not be in the right location to really engage as much with that ecosystem either. So that's one of the next countries we're looking at. And France has 8 tech IPOs versus 17 for the UK. And it's, a few of them are mentioned there. Some of them obviously are more important to us than others. I mean, we may or may not be involved with Skybet, but there are some of the other companies out there that we've already had some significant engagements with. And I think this gives you an example of where some of the hubs are. And that's obviously not all of them are in London, but there's a lot of the hub within various parts of London and the southern part of the UK. And we believe that even with some of the customers, such as in places like Oxford or Hull or other parts of England, or perhaps even of Scotland and Wales, we can engage with those companies. This building here is something where we can bring small companies in, for example, to work with us for a month, to be able to engage, as we've talked, not only with Brunel, but with other universities around the UK. So there's a lot of interesting areas for ADI here. Anything to do with advanced manufacturing, health tech, med tech is similar. Some of the virtual reality, we talked about machine learning and AI, and advanced manufacturing again. So a lot of technology hubs in the UK. examples there. We've worked obviously with CMR Surgical. We've worked with Oxford Nanopore for many years, but have hit a $1.5 billion valuation from a company that has started in the last decade or so. So I think that the point of this slide really is again to show that all of that innovation is happening in the UK, and it's something that Analog Devices wants to engage with, be part of, and use that to drive our future growth so that we can be either maintain that ratio of where we are today in terms of our position in the EMEA sales number, or grow it even further. And that's the aim for us. So I think our vision, and you have to look at this thing on a 10-year vision. We are investing in the UK to drive our growth for the next 10 years, to be able to attract the right talent, to be able to engage with customers, show them that we're serious in having the right kind of innovation hub here in Hayes. And we think that the UK has proven over the last number of years, and even in 2018 that was, with a strong investment and a strong investment in new companies, 7.9 billion for new company startups. One of the things for us that's attractive for ADI, when we talk about the company again, one other thing you'll hear Vince talk about is diversification. And it's important for us. The UK is not dependent on one end market for the electronics industry here. It's not dependent on one particular market trend. There's a huge diversification which fits ADI extremely well. I talked about the big companies, but there's also a large fragmented customer base in industrial, in aerospace and defense, and of course companies supporting the few big companies in mobility and companies supporting in the communication space. Probably not as good, not as large as the 5G leaders, but again, companies that have that technological and innovation strength to be able to compete in niches of the 5G and smart cell markets, for example. We may well require to have some new business models. New business models for us could be, how far do we go up the chain from the sensor to the cloud? And that can vary depending on which business you're in, who you're working with. And I think the UK is quite a good microcosm of that, because there are lots, again, of smaller companies trying to test those new business models. So from ADI, that's something that we're constantly engaged with, seeing how we can add most value to our customers and take most of the value that we can from that signal chain. And of course, I mentioned already about the software and the AI and complex system level solutions. And from that point of view, we need to stay close to the European customer base to make sure that we can support them, whether it's, or the UK customer base, to make sure that we can support them, whether it's in this location or with our sales team throughout the rest of the country. So overall, I said, ignore any gloom that might be there at the moment, ignore that. We have a 10-year vision, and we really think that the UK is one of the places to be. Analog Devices have taken that bet, made the commitment, and hopefully we'll be engaging with all of you here today over that time frame, explaining what we're doing for our innovation in the UK. Thank you.
Okay, good morning everyone. I'm Alistair Boyd. Where did it all start in terms of integration? This gentleman here, Heraclitus. Now, in my LinkedIn profile I wrote some years ago, I actually said that change is the only constant. And what I didn't realize was I was actually plagiarizing a philosopher from 2,500 years ago in ancient Greece. And I thought, this is actually true, because in the last, I've been in the industry 37 years. During that time, change is happening all the time. So he was right, change is the only constant. And then I thought, well, why do companies acquire other companies? Now, I started my career in the 80s in Ferranti Defence in Scotland. I was a designer. Now, after I left Ferranti wanted to move into the American market, and they bought a company, I think it was called ISC, and that turned out to be a disaster for them. It actually killed their company. So in acquisitions, there are actually big risks involved. Some companies avoid them, some companies do them a lot. After my Ferranti days, I decided I was a bit of a talkative engineer, so I moved into technical sales with Burr Brown, and that was good. So I actually got out of Burr Brown. So I got out of Ferranti before they bought ISC, and I got out of Burr Brown before TI bought them. Okay, so I was thinking there's a trend here. Maybe I can, leapfrog things before things happen. So I then, after Burr Brown, I went to Maxim, And I was at Maxim when they bought Dallas Semiconductor. And looking back on it, again, the reason for the acquisition wasn't for products or technology, it was for silicon designers. Jack Gifford wanted all the silicon designers. And it would have been cheaper for him to give $5 million to every designer. Much, much cheaper. Okay? So obviously, I left Maxim, went to Linear, very happy at Linear. And then I got a phone call 2 years ago, and it said, we're being acquired. And my first reaction was, oh crap. Okay, or maybe even something stronger. But then I thought, who buy? So I was told it was Analog Devices. I thought, okay, I'm glad it's them, not somebody else. And in my work experience, I'd always felt that Analog Devices and Linear Tech were a natural fit. Now that TI took National off the table back in 2011, it made sense having ADI and Linear Tech come together. So, and that's what's been happening in the last 2 years, the integration of linear technology with ADI. So, where it all started now, we have this internal expression called 1 + 1 is greater than 2. And in acquisitions, 1 + 1 is very rarely equal to or greater than 2. Most often 1 + 1 is actually less than 2. It really doesn't work. So if you actually look at the strengths of ADI, where ADI were playing, and you look at where Linear Tech was playing, then it's extremely complementary. So Linear was known for power, but what people don't realize is that Linear had some fantastic data converters that we had to work, our designers had to work around all the patents that Analog Devices held. Similarly, Analog Devices was not known for power, but they've got some fantastic power parts. So again, when the two product ranges came together, they actually found that rather than competing and conflicting, they actually filled gaps in the product range. So I think that was a great example of 1 + 1 greater than 2. And I think it's probably one of the most successful acquisitions, I think, or integrations, at least in my career. So one of the key things that make it work is culture. And that's why I think it's really important. So ADI and Linear Tech were quite similar in their approach to the market, their approach to innovation, what was important to them. In terms of when there were all these surveys done of both companies' workforces in terms of what they thought of their company, and there was a lot of similarity in terms of how the employees felt about ADI and felt about Linear Tech. So I think when you come from a common cultural background in terms of your approach to innovation and technology, it makes the marriage work. And I think that's where we are now. So in terms of actually why we're actually here, as Mike said, it's just really the next stage of integration. So fundamentally for us, really it's a focal point for ADI in the UK. There's lots of people that work for ADI, they're field-based, and having a focal point for all the different field resources and business unit resources is very important. And again, one team, because we're such a big company now, we can't know everyone, and we can't know all the business units and so on. So if we can have a place where, like this, where business unit guys and technology guys can come together, we can bring our people in, and you'll get to see it. This is a really attractive office. And hats off to Shalini, because I don't do colour very well. I literally have trouble getting dressed in the morning. So literally all the taste out there, that's Shalini, okay? A hub, business units, channel partners, Anglia and Arrow, marketing and management. We all want to have a place where they can all come together and meet our people. Customers. I mean, coming from a Maxim and Linear Tech background, we never had offices that we could bring customers to, right? We really couldn't. So this is going to be great if we can actually start having customers coming here. And again, an infrastructure that's going to support us over the next 10 to 15 years. So I think that's very, very important. So I like Field of Dreams as a DVD, Kevin Costner movie. And he always said, if you build it, they will come. And that's not true, right? You need to build it, market it, and sell it, and then they'll come. And that's what we hope for this office.
So good afternoon, everyone. So I was thinking, when Jackie asked me to talk about my new role, which I did accept a month ago, I jumped at actually, so I love cars. So I thought, well, what a perfect role for me at a time where there's so much going on in the mobility and transportation market. So I thought, as we are in our London office, it would be very appropriate to focus around, you know, what's all the hype around electrification and autonomous driving. So, the revolution in mobility. So a vision of London in 2030. So I thought, let's think about what all of these technologies, all of these challenges, these massive societal challenges that we have are going to mean for London. Okay, so, all right, so here's the vision, right? So the Mayor of London announces complete ban on petrol and diesel vehicles entering the M25 from 2032. Okay, so, you know, there you basically, that is going to drive electrification, right? We're going to need a different way to power our cars. London's pollution level has fallen by more than 50% by 2020, by 2030 from now. You know, here again, so actually a little fact that I learned was 90% of the population are breathing air that is below World Health Organization stats, right? So that is astounding, yeah. So this isn't just tech and hype. This is reality. These are challenges that we've got to solve. Okay, so you know, electrification is going to help us drive to reducing that pollution down. Something that's close to my heart, you know, I mean, I am a working mother. My son is 13 now, but I can tell you, in the early years, having a way to get my son safely to and from school and to the many clubs, he plays very, very sporty, he plays clubs, you know, that would have changed my world in terms of being able to work effectively. So I know that that would allow more parents to work comfortably in, you know, Jackie will know that too, right? So, and, you know, getting their children to and from school in taxis. Right, so more effectivity, more productivity, more money for London and the UK. Here's another thought. So, you know, actually, it could be in 2030 that it's cheaper to use mobility services compared to owning your own car, which could be equivalent in some cases to a 10% pay rise. So, you know, actually here we are in a real evolution, not just about ownership of cars, but how do we get around? What other options do we have? You know, is the technology there? Is the infrastructure there? So all of those are interesting challenges, right? You know, vehicles will need to be different. They'll need to be safer. You'll want to have zones in terms of what you're looking like, in terms of your privacy, your comfort, actually even your health, right? So we have technology that would even look at your health inside a vehicle. And then, of course, AV, autonomous vehicle technology and driver monitoring. And we hear a lot about driverless cars, and we're a long way from that. But, you know, could you imagine moving to 2030, we can say that we reduce death to zero, car accident death to zero. Today, I think it's about 1.3 million people die in car accidents. Right? I think it's 600,000 in the UK. This is a year. So imagine, you know, so this isn't about, you know, let's have some gadgetry in the car. And I think at the moment it is hands on the wheel, 30 seconds and it's off. This is about doing something that is life-changing for us, right? We've got issues in terms of aging populations. You know, we need to preserve our people, right? So autonomous driving is going to give us so much more in terms of a vision of you know, how life can be and how electrification, how looking at autonomous driverless vehicles can give us. And, you know, looking at the cabin, connectivity. So you look at my little picture here, right? So the connectivity from car to car, cars to the environment, to the infrastructure. So I have to say I'm delighted, thank you Mike, for this role. It's one of the most exciting times I think in the mobility and transportation market, and I'm very, very delighted to be leading the effort in Europe at Analog Devices, who have a huge amount of technology and know-how. And linking it to in terms of being here, we're all about collaborating with our customers. We're all about how we can help the tier ones, the OEMs, and actually all of the companies that are going to be part of the effort here to bring this forward. So that was a few words on my role and the excitement that I have around it. And then I guess I just wanted to share with you a message from our CEO, which is very, very relevant and kind of taps into what you've already heard from Mike and Alistair. But this is about, you know, how do we work together? How do we collaborate internally amongst each other, with our customers, with the infrastructures, with universities, to drive results faster? As you can see, just in mobility and transportation, which is one market, we've got some big things that need to be sorted now, right? So this is a very, very, very relevant message from Vincent Roche, our CEO. You know, we need to take responsibility together. We need to accelerate the impact that we have on the market, on the environment, to address the challenges, and how do we drive results much faster. So yeah, so with that, I'd like to hand over back to Jackie. So thank you for listening to me.